So I think we'll get things started here. Hello. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be data-driven and human-centered. And I think sometimes when we think about those things, we think about them as very differently, even incompatible sometimes. Maybe sometimes we go heads down into the data and then we come up once in a while and think about what those humans are doing. Or maybe we leave the data to those people over there with the calculators and the humans to the people over there with the sticky notes. And sometimes they come together and spar and figure out what we could actually do to serve both purposes. So this is what we want to explore today, but we'll start by introducing ourselves. I head up product design at When I Work, and our team does everything from product design, strategy, UX research and design, rapid prototyping, to illustration work and iconography, typography, things like that. So I'll let Jeff introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Snyder. I'm on the growth team at When I Work. That's what I looked like 10 years ago, if you were wondering. And yeah, we're just excited to get into this.
All right. So because we're going to share examples from our work together a little bit, I'll give you a little bit of context. We work at When I Work. It's a local SaaS startup. It's mobile first, so we have iOS and Android and web applications. The focus is on hourly workers, small to medium to large businesses, and specifically how to improve the way hourly workers communicate with their managers through things like the scheduling and time and attendance and everything in between. So what we're going to go through a little bit is, what is human-centered design? How do we define that? Learning at scale, the sort of data-driven side of this, and some test examples from our work together. So to start with that context of what it means to be human-centered. Robots are coming. Everything is getting automated, and I have a friend who would be very upset with me for putting that up there without like a proper trigger warning because she's terrified of this. But there's no going back. Our jobs will increasingly be to humanize things, right? And to make sure that what we build fits into the lives of humans and enriches those lives. And that takes a deep understanding of what it means to be human and what makes us different and how we go about whatever it is that we do. So being human-centered, it means we're informing what we create with a deep understanding of the humans we serve. And design thinking takes that human-centered approach and makes it your business strategy, makes it core to everything that you do. Tim Brown of IDEO, a renowned design consultancy, describes it this way: a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. So there's 3 pillars there, and the first is the needs of people. And I love this illustration by Sam Hulick to help us understand what matters to customers, right? They don't give a shit about our feature. They want products that help them, that create a better version of themselves. So they want to know how it affects them and how it fits into their lives and how it changes their life. We have to understand both sides of the equation there in order to do that. We have to understand the human, or Mario, and the flower, our product, to know how to get to that, better version of our customers. So that's the first pillar of design thinking. Then we need to consider, is this feasible, right? And this changes all the time. The robots are coming. So what's feasible in this world where technology is shifting so fast is constantly something we have to watch. And then what's sustainable for our business? If it's not, we might as well not bother. And actually, when I Work first started, mobile phones weren't ubiquitous, and it just wasn't time yet. So they started a second time when that was there and that was available, and that's when it took off. So unless we're in the business of making conceptual art, and some of us might be, we need access to the right tech. We need a purpose in mind, a business goal. And that's the point here, building better services that strengthen our business. The Design Management Institute studied a bunch of companies recently, and they used specific criteria to kind of measure which of them use design as an integrated resource at the highest levels of the organization, throughout the organization. And they identified the companies that met this criteria as design-driven. And over a course of a 10-year period, they found that those companies outperformed the S&P by 228%, so not insignificant. These companies have made design thinking an integral part of how they operate. They were able to innovate more efficiently and successfully for a sustained period of time. And they all went about this different ways. You know, IBM decided they were going to hire 1,000 designers because they'd seen return on investment from that. Intuit with their Catalyst program, which is an interesting story in itself. And Disney, of course, seems to weave it into everything it is that they do. So all different approaches, but all prioritize this concept of design thinking. Now, just to give you sort of comparison to similar business models, we've all used Craigslist probably at one point or another, and it gets the job done. You can use it to rent a place to stay. But last I checked, there's no good way to really verify anything about the host or the guest. So technically, you know, you've got the features you need to perform that function, but it's really creepy, and you might not want to do it. But on paper, that's Airbnb's business model, it appears, right? But they recognize that the heart of what they're doing is creating an experience for their customers. And their mission from the beginning has been to make the experience of finding somewhere to stay a delightful one for the user, both guest and host. So they've taken human-centered design and integrated it from start to finish. And this goes beyond the app and the website. They're looking at everything in between. The experience of their customer actually being on the app or their website is something like, you know, in the low single digits of a % of the time they're actually having that vacation or that experience. So they recognize that, and they design those transitions and everything in between that they can affect to make that experience better. And in this way, they've uncovered new opportunities. You know, they're looking at what additional value the hosts can provide by virtue of living in that city. And they've provided more value to the hosts by rolling out different business models for them. So they're relentlessly focused on experience, and they also identify as a highly data-driven organization. These two things are not in conflict with one another. Their data scientists like to say that data isn't numbers, it's people. And their job is to represent the very human voice of their customers, their guests, and their hosts. So we often think of data as cold, hard numbers, and that's a very narrow view. When we go out and talk to our users, when we learn about their behaviors and their motivations, we start to understand them and uncover insights about how we might solve their challenges for them or influence their behaviors with our product. This is all data, and we're interpreting it with our brains. We're using our very innately human ability to empathize. And it's difficult and messy to parse this kind of data, but it's where we find some of the richest insights. But our brains can fool us, and inconveniently we all have different brains, right? So we work hard to find ways to quantifiable patterns in the data, but we all interpret this complicated data a little bit differently, and that's where forming hypotheses and testing comes in. And we'd like to tell you a little bit about how we approach this at When I Work to validate our understanding of the data, all this data that's available to us.
Yeah, so really what we're talking about is how do we rapidly scale this practice of constantly trying to understand our users while impacting the business. Hold on. I think we're back.
Worked for me.
I'm on the growth team. We break things a lot, and so that's part of it. And so we all know that happy users, right, are going to help us grow our business. And a happy user is a very valuable user to us. But we need to try to understand what makes them happy. And we do that, as Sarah was saying, by testing. We test constantly, and we test almost everything. At least that's our goal, is to constantly test. And so if we're building something, first of all, if our goal is to better understand our users, we want to build the smallest thing possible that will give us that understanding, right? We don't need to invest a ton of time just to get one learning that could be discovered by a much smaller test. We also want to measure at a large scale. We also want to make sure that we're measuring against the right key performance indicators that are actually impacting the business. And with those learnings that we're getting, we use that to fuel new tests and new ideas, new things that we can launch and roll out. But to impact the business, we need to make sure that we're looking at the right metrics, right? So our team, and really the company, is focused on trying to move the needle in these areas. We want to acquire more users. We want to get them engaged with our product. We want them to buy it, and then we want them to get so much value that they want to give us more money, right? Because we introduce new features, new opportunities for them to streamline their business in the way that they're doing things. And then as we retain those customers and they love our company, they're going to tell their friends about it. Every single one of these steps has a measurable way to determine if we're actually moving that needle. So if, let's say somebody comes to our website, if we are communicating our value proposition clearly and it's compelling, more people are going to sign up, right? We know that that's working. If our product is really engaging, that they get it, they're getting value every day, we have metrics that we can track to prove that. And so on and so forth. I mean, there are ways that everything that we do should be moving the needle in one of these areas. And that's not just on our team. On the growth team, that's my focus every day, is constantly running tests to try to make an impact in one of these areas. But throughout the company, there are ways to validate that what we're doing is working by looking at these metrics. And that requires a test-oriented culture, right? A culture that is motivated by making an impact. A culture where we have the tools in place to measure all those metrics that I was showing you, right? That we're tracking the right events, that we have that framework to know that we're doing something that is actually moving the business forward. We're focused on learning and experimenting, right? Where it's okay to fail. And we're constantly pushing ahead to make sure that we're growing and serving our customers better today than we were the day before. And we're focused on execution. So we don't waste a lot of time thinking about what might happen, right? We just do it and we find out what happens. So how do we figure out what we'll actually test, right? Because if you're on the product team or dev team or really any team within a company, there's this fire hose of feedback that's coming from the users. It's coming from the sales team, the care team. They have all of these issues that people are potentially facing, all of these ideas of things that we could do better. We have to be really careful with that, right? We can't build everything that somebody brings up, every little issue that a user might have. We have to make sure that the affected population is large enough to actually justify a test where we will move one of those metrics that we saw earlier. Because if we won't, there's other areas that we can focus that will help move that business forward. Now, with all that said, though, we do get a lot of great ideas from those teams. And we sit down and we have brainstorming sessions with the sales team and the care team. And they actually show up and they will bring hypotheses of what they think might happen. And so they are coming in with kind of this, and this is our process that we follow. So every idea that comes in, we score it. And we look at, okay, what's the probability of success here? How likely is this test to succeed based on what we know about our customers, tests we've run in the past? We use data, this will come back, but I can talk through it. We use data to actually validate that these are real opportunities, right? And that we're gonna reach a large enough audience to make an impact. And then, importantly, we look at what's the minimum viable test. What's the smallest investment we can make to get this learning and see if there's something promising here. See if there's something that we can iterate on to make an even bigger impact. And then we test against that hypothesis, and we have data, right? Everything is based on the data that we see. We have data to know whether or not it worked, and maybe it's just not plugged in here. And then we either iterate or we move on. And so, that moving on piece is really important because there are a lot of times where we want something to work so bad. We want this new feature to work. We want people to use it. But there's just no sense in trying to polish that turd, right? If no one's using it, it's not worth investing your time. There's other areas where you can focus. And with all of our tests we run, we actually expect 80% of them to be turds. We expect them to fail. But all of those turds actually should provide us with, you'll see it in a second. Hold on. Oh, with learnings, guys. Beautiful, you saw it. Beautiful purple unicorn turds that teach us about our customers. And the only real failure with these tests is if we don't learn something, and that's not okay. So every test should have a clear outcome that we're shooting for, and a learning that we know is going to help push that business forward. Hold on. Sure. Just
See if this is better.
I'll try it. You have to switch your display to.
Oh, yeah, okay. How do you do it?
Go here, and there we go. And now you gotta pull it back up. Oh, you got them switched around. That's not gonna, no, yeah, drag it over here. Nope, you're gonna have to drag it.
Yeah.
No, that was right. There we go, we're good. All right, as you guys can see, the formula is speed times quality. So, speed times quality is really how we're going to get to success, because we have to move fast. We have to take these really small tests, and we have to run as many as possible. Our team, on the growth team, we're going to run at least 50 tests by the end of next quarter, just this year alone. And all of those tests are helping us learn more about our customers and helping us move the needle on one of those key funnel metrics. And the cool thing is, while 80% are failing, we're getting a lot smarter as we go along, right? Because the learnings we get about what works and what doesn't are directly proportional to the quality of the tests we're putting out. All right, it's the cable. It's clearly the cable now. Yeah. Do those all plug into it? Here, how about this guy? Will that work?
I'll try your computer.
And we're gonna have to switch the input though. Okay. That's this one. So we have to switch it to, it's at Apple port. Let's keep cruising.
Alright.
This is, we'll just get her going. Right now, this thing is. All right, here we go. So I actually want to take you guys through an example test. The visuals are nice, but not completely necessary. So if we do lose things, I'll just keep going through it. So this is a test that we ran, and we followed this process of, all right, what's the minimum viable tests that we can run to get a learning that would tell us, okay, is it worth having a free version of our product? Compared to the free trial that we have today. So today, people go in, they sign up, they get a 30-day trial. It's how we've built our business for the past few years, to hundreds of thousands of monthly active users, to millions of dollars in annual revenue. And it's a really scary question, because we've done a lot. I mean, it's got us to where we are. But if it turns out to be the direction we need to go, it's a question that we have to answer. And so once we started down this path, we got all sorts of pushback, right? Any new idea that's really changing the business it's going to get pushback. So we have to figure out really small ways to test it. We'd hear, I mean, that's impossible, obviously. All of our customers are just gonna stop paying us. They're all gonna downgrade to that free plan if we do it. All right, sales isn't ready. Care can't support it. My favorites, something you guys may hear, is why would we change something that's worked for years? Right? Has anybody heard that before? Yeah? Okay. And we've considered it before. It just won't work. Right? That's another one you hear all the time. But there are ways that we can prove this out with really small, simple changes. And then if we see success, we go to the next piece, right? And so the first thing we did, right? So today we actually do have a free plan for 5 users, and the feature set's limited, but anyone can use it. First part of the test, let's just change that variable in the back end from 5 users to 100, right? And let's change the landing page to say that 100 employees can use it for free, right? These are small changes, right? But by doing that, we were able to send some traffic there, get a cohort of new accounts that were just in a regular trial that were under 100 employees, and then a cohort that were in this free plan that were under 100 employees. And then we watched them over the next 45 days or so to see how many converted, how active were they, and how much revenue did we get at the end of the day. What we saw with this plan is that the monthly active users were up. We were getting more people to sign up where they were using the product. It was free, right? So they were still using it. But our revenue was down. And for our business today, that just wasn't going to work, right? So we had to try to find a balance. But there was another really important question that we answered with this test, and that's how many more people will just simply sign up if we say that there's a free plan? So this was an Optimizely test, just some front-end changes that we rolled out. And after we launched this, we saw almost 2x signups on our various landing pages just by doing this. So now we have these 2 data points, right? We have this free plan that's driving more monthly actives, not quite as much revenue, and we're getting double the signups. So we're getting a lot more people exposed to our product. And if you go back to human-centered thinking, we're helping a lot more people. We're helping more business owners and managers and employees make their life a little bit easier. But we still had to figure out that money piece, because money is important. So we had to tweak the feature set. And we have lots of levers that we can pull here with the features. And we decided let's kind of go more on the extreme side, right? People are using us for scheduling. So let's actually limit how far into the future they can schedule. And so if somebody wanted to schedule more than 10 days in the future, they would get this little pop-up. And this is something we're going to continue to iterate on and test against. But what we saw when we did this is that the monthly active users were up, which is a really important metric for us, and revenue was up. So this is a huge win. Like it's a really big deal that we were able to, just by changing those plans, make revenue increase a little bit and drive up more monthly active users. And on top of this, we also ran some additional tests to see how our paid channels converted, right? What was the cost per new customer across those channels? And we saw that, okay, we'll be able to invest a lot more here with this. We did some more landing page testing to see if we could get that sign-up rate even higher. And the biggest question, though, that was kind of still looming over us, and this was the final question to really answer, right? Because it's one of those questions that if we hadn't done all the things we did before, right, this would have taken months of debating and all sorts of modeling about, okay, this scenario is going to happen and we're going to lose all these customers, or that scenario. And everybody would have their own ideas and theories. But going back to execution, we just did it, right? So we thought, what's the worst case scenario? And so we actually took a few thousand customers and we emailed them and told them, hey, we have this free plan now. So if you want to downgrade, you can. That's not something we'd actually do, right, if we were to roll this out. But we wanted to see, okay, like what's the worst case? And who here thinks it was above 20%? Anybody? You guys are optimistic. That's amazing. You would be right. And what we saw was actually, this is actually pretty accurate. Single-digit percents decided to downgrade because they were so ingrained in our product. They didn't like the limitations we put on free, and they were getting value out of it every single day as it was, and it was worth what they were paying. And so now at this point, we're making the decision to move forward with a free version of our product. It rolls out first week of next month, and we're going to continue learning. We're going to continue testing different features to see how we can maximize monthly active users and monthly revenue. But with all these new users coming in, right, there's still a lot of opportunity to optimize our product, right? So that test was more kind of on the bottom of the funnel. There was some activity at the top of the funnel. But let's see if we can get people as engaged as possible. Did you have a question? Now's a good time.
How do you find that balance between what you offer in your premium service and your full services?
It depends on the data. Like if it's just a lot of testing to see, I mean, if the monthly active users are going down, right, on the freemium side, and that revenue really isn't going up, we know that that feature set just isn't strong enough to keep people compelled with our product and really engage with it every day. So it's really about finding that balance, and what we're going to be looking for in all these tests is, can we drive both up? Can we drive up monthly active user count and that monthly revenue of getting people to convert from free to paid? And that's really going to be our focus going forward. And so this is, oh, that's the wrong laptop. This is another test that we're focused on. And this one's about getting people engaged. So this is our onboarding flow. Basically, anybody that creates a new account is taken through this guided setup, as we call it, where they add positions, which is going to be like cashier, waitress, host, what have you. And they add some employees, and they create a shift. Right? It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It kind of drags that nice little bubble throughout the app and shows you where to click. But there was a lot of opportunity here. We saw that 50% of people were just skipping this altogether. And those that were actually filling it out were not doing too much. They weren't putting very much information in. There were a lot of people just kind of breezing through it, not engaging with it. And it's also very restrictive in what we can actually test, right? So if testing and learning is our objective, doing something that's solely focused on what people can click on in the app is going to limit us to what's only on that screen, right? But our goal is to make it so as soon as somebody lands in that schedule for the first time, it's as relevant to what they're doing today as possible. And that means that we have to give them a better way to walk through it. And so here's what we tested. We tested a more controlled and a dialogue-based onboarding that allows us to inject different steps that aren't necessarily just kind of on that main UI. And by doing that, and so actually there was one other hypothesis on the last one, and that's that schedule behind there was distracting, right? People just wanted to jump in, skip through it so they could start clicking around and exploring. With this experience, we can add or remove steps very easily. We can test different things. Like right now we have a test where there's a different step in the middle there that prompts people to add a manager, right? So it's a lot more flexible in what we can do. So people's first experience is extremely relevant and valuable. So what we saw is that there was a 20% lift in people filling out onboarding. Our top of funnel metrics like engagement were up, and we drove a higher conversion rate. And this is just the first iteration, right? There's still a lot of room for improvement here. And an example of that is this. So it might be hard to read, but this is where we're asking people to add positions. And on the left, you can see people are just putting in multiple positions with the exact same name. It's not going to help them going forward. It's going to be very confusing when they try to build out that schedule. And on the right, we have people adding their positions and their employees on this screen, even though we've got that nice text above there that tells them that's not how you're supposed to do it. Even though there's a nice, let's see. So even though in that step, that progress bar at the top, you can see that they're going to add employees at later steps, it really doesn't matter. It's our fault for making that screen confusing. And what it tells us is that there's an opportunity to improve this, right? People are still confused. Even though it's driving an impact, we can make it better and help people do what they need to do much, much easier. And that's what that's what her team helps us with all the time. And she's going to talk through some of that process for understanding how we uncover those new ideas, those new opportunities to make our experience much more valuable.
That test that, oh, this isn't going to work now again. that test that Jeff just went through was a really successful test, so we're excited to see how much further we can take it. We always run into things that we don't expect and didn't predict, and we find that the qualitative research and getting in there and observing customers using things helps us understand the things that he just outlined there. It helps us understand the why behind the numbers. We can see that they're doing certain things, the numbers are clear, but we don't necessarily know why until we talk to them. I got nothing. All right, so Hillary Mason, some of you might know that name. She's a data scientist that, arguably she understands data as well as anybody out there. And she tweeted recently, all of the answers we want are not in the data. They never are. Sometimes we need to get out and talk to people. And she couldn't be more right. Sometimes there's no replacement for sitting down with somebody and understanding what's going through their mind. It can help us avoid the DART strategy. Picture a dartboard here. That's what I got. When everyone has ideas and they all make perfect business sense, but we don't necessarily know, what's going to serve the customers. We can throw all those things at the wall and see what sticks, or we can hold off. I don't know what to do here. What's that? Peter Drucker says there's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. Are you solving a pressing problem for your customer? And what's relevant to them? That's what we're interested in hearing. So going back to Jeff's slide there, the humans are confused. The hard numbers told us this was a significant improvement. I can't even see my screen. All right. But qualitative observation helped us understand that it could have been even better. So I wanted to show you our latest iteration. It basically switches things around quite a bit because we understood that we weren't matching what we put in front of them with their mental model. And we need to help managers understand these relationships in our product. So we put it out there in front of a new iteration, in front of managers to see how that works. We've got a new iteration, and we'll try that and see if it fails. If it does fail, we lost a little bit of time, basically. It won't be like this huge emergency. It'll just be, a little blip, and we'll learn something so that we can improve it for the next study. There's a bunch of scientific studies recently that if you watch somebody perform something, you experience their pain or emotion like your brain fires in much the same way. So actual, vicarious learning works very well watching somebody, and it's far more efficient, obviously, than learning a new skill and trying something yourself. So it's a great tool to help us understand, which people are the right fit and how to attract them and influence their behaviors. I keep trying.
There's no IT people here that can help us.
Really? Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so instead of focusing on just, how can we increase engagement, we can start to ask questions like, we've seen communication challenges between employees and their managers. How can we be part of solving that problem with them? And so we observe and learn and we try stuff. I really have great. Oh, it's beautiful, but it's not what I'm showing you. You guys are, what's that? Mirroring it? No, yeah, you want to try mirroring one of them and see if that's, I think it's the cable. It just seems to, you could, yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Okay, cool. All right, so vicarious learning. It's pretty efficient. And so we observe and we learn and then we try stuff. And we make quick and simple tests and take it back to them and see if we understood their perspective and made the right assumptions. And 4 out of 5 people might struggle with what you did, and we can learn very quickly whether we're on the right track, whether we just need to make a slight adjustment, whether we need to kind of throw that away and try something completely different. So simplifying, humanizing, that's what we end up doing, and it does help with this funnel here. We improve first impressions. We reduce friction. We're eliminating some of those barriers to getting people on board. We can increase our value to them and make it more likely they'll love our product and tell their friends. So I'm on a Douglas Hubbard wrote the book How to Measure Anything, and he says if you have a lot of uncertainty now, you don't need much data to reduce uncertainty significantly. Because we hear a lot of times, is this, you're talking to 4 or 5 people, what could you possibly learn? It's not statistically significant. And so when you're at the beginning like that and everything's fuzzy, you can learn, a great deal just by starting with a small sample, and it's much more efficient in some cases. It depends on what you need to learn. Another way to look at it is if we're building a bridge, borrowing from Jared Spool's analogy here, 3 out of people fall off the bridge. You're probably not going to say, let's wait until we have a significantly, statistically significant sample to go back and make changes, right? So we've learned enough to take that next step. So we can sum all this up really with one word, and that's learning. Be continuously learning and using all forms of data that we have at our disposal to do that in the most efficient way possible. We now accept, Peter Drucker said, we now accept the fact that learning is a lifelong process of keeping abreast of change, and the most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. There's been some interesting studies recently by a woman named Carol Dweck, who's a professor at Stanford, and she did some research that helped us understand that we're all on kind of different places along a spectrum of people. Some have a fixed mindset and some have a growth mindset. So depending on where you are in that spectrum, it influences, if you have a fixed mindset, you believe that your abilities, intelligence, talent, they're fixed, right? And if you have a growth mindset, you believe that you can continue to evolve and learn those things. Oh, it's not working. Okay. So if you have a growth mindset, you understand that you can continue to evolve your talents and abilities. And wherever we fall on this spectrum influences to a great degree like our beliefs and our behaviors. And so one way that this is relevant here is if we have a fixed mindset, we fear failure. We believe that it makes our inadequacies, which are fixed in our mind, available to others to see, right? And if we have a growth mindset, we're less risk averse. We view those experiences as a chance to learn something new. So the good news is, if we identify with one side of the spectrum and want to be further along the other, Dwecker shows how we can shift our mindset. So we can try new challenges. If we're managers, we can influence this by rewarding people for, trying new things instead of, doing what it is that they know how to do really well already. So I think Dr. Seuss said it best. It's better to know how to learn than to know. We can learn to get better at learning. And that'll be the best way to use this wealth of data that we have access to humanize our world. Thank you for sticking with us through this. I don't know what happened there. So, any questions? Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that having the goals, sharing the goals with the people in your trying to influence, drive towards that,
Yeah.
get that feedback goal, that's one of the things that I sharing success.
Right. No, I mean, are you talking about sort of the team knowing what their goal is, right, across the organization? I think that's huge, right? Like the leadership of the organization needs to communicate a clear goal, and you understand you're part of that, and don't lose sight of that being the common objective, so that different teams aren't kind of striving for different things that end up being opposed to each other. Yeah, that's a great point. Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, so the question was how do we determine if a test is successful or if it fails? And every test we have a desired outcome that's assigned to it. So with the freemium test that we ran, right, that first test was our desired outcome is that monthly active users were going to go up by simply changing that limit from 5 users to 100, and that our revenue would go up as well. And so when we saw that, okay, monthly active users were up and this was statistically significant, right, that was a promising result that we could iterate on. If we saw that they were both way down, right, there's a good chance, and because we wanted it to work, or at least to give it a shot, we would look at all the data, we'd look at how people were engaging with the product, and then we'd probably come up with a new hypothesis that said, okay, it's this feature or that feature, and let's test including those to see if it makes an impact. We will, but if we don't see that, it doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't successful. We'll look at the data that comes in and determine, if it's worth iterating on, and if we got some valuable learnings, they might influence a new test. Yeah.
So what drives that jump? That's a big jump, 5 to 100. So the business is doing that. That's a big task.
Yeah, it is. It is. The first thing was we were going to control how many people saw that, right? And how many people were exposed to being able to actually sign up for that test on the landing pages. So only a fraction of the people who hit our pricing page, for example, would see that new plan, but it allowed us to get a sufficient sample size in each group without exposing it to everybody. Yeah.
That's a time when the qualitative can come in first too, because you can talk to like an even smaller set of people and see what kind of interest you generate and what, how it works for them, before you even put it out to, a segment of people, because you really want to test, those behaviors first, and then you want to see whether, testing with that small group works at scale, and you see the same kind of results from that.
Once you determine that the test is a success, what comes next? What's the timeline look like? I imagine it depends on the size of the test and the objective, but just from what sort of team might take over or what sort of team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with every test, we have, when we're going through and, as a product manager, I define, okay, this is the hypothesis, this is what we expect to happen, this is what we're going to measure. One thing we also include is, if this is successful, what will we do next? What will this tell us, and how can we build upon it? For some things, it's pretty straightforward. Like one example of a test that just got put into the product was we added a little add employee button at the bottom of the scheduler. That's not something we can iterate on too much, and so our team would hand that off to the product team, and Sarah and her team make it look a lot prettier than we did, and then that just gets implemented into the product. There's some, like that onboarding, where it was a win, and we knew that our next step, if this was successful, was to try to make it even better before it was permanently implemented into the product. And so it's all about just defining those things up front, so we know what our next action is, and then those things just get prioritized based on potential impact. Yeah.
The product advisory board, or like marquee customers you've had for a long time, that you can ask, even if they're not going to do the page, you can ask them their feedback directly and bypass this testing and ask the users what they think about what might impact the tool.
Yeah, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think it's always a balance. So sometimes we can, sometimes the growth team, has some hypothesis that's easy to test with a small percentage of people, and they can kind of go ahead and do that. And we don't want to be like a bottleneck to that, right? But then there's other things where it really makes sense to get some of that feedback from real people and make sure, it makes sense to them. We're not just kind of doing random things in the site that end up confusing people. So that's definitely a balance that we look for, trying to make sure we've got the human aspect balanced with just trying things. But the organization is kind of not afraid of pushing those boundaries a little bit to recognizing that what might work for one customer might not for another, and we kind of have to look at the big picture.
Yeah, we don't have anything official. Do we, Tamer? I'm just looking at our director of product. There's nothing official like this core list, but there are customers that we will reach out to. We have some local customers who we talk to a lot, and that's extremely helpful. But yeah, we're starting a beta program for some new features, so I think that's going to be a good source of insights too.
I mean, where I work, we do that, and it's still in its infancy, but it's really cool to see a small group and a super large group, because the small group and the large group often have the same insights, but you're maybe neglecting to ask the smaller group, because my company's focused on the larger group. So the product board meets a couple times a year, and it's really cool to see the product team directly interface with those customers, and that adjusts the way you want to prioritize what you're going to release, because what you think is not at all
Sure.
what the customer wants.
Do you bring them on site to do that?
On-site, or sometimes the customers will all get together at a central location. I work for a company based in the California area, but the last one was here because a lot of the companies happen to be in this area. So we had one of the customers host for an all-day event and just ran through a lot of things to steer the next 6 months or year of the product.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I know that our product team does go on customer visits, but actually I like that idea of something more structured and regular.
Just curious how you manage the data, maybe to this question. If you have your biggest customer that says, I want to pay for this, but yet no one else will use it, how do you manage the testing to see if you want to go that route, or do you want to convince this company, or do you want to,
Yeah, so
roadmaps and all of that?
if one customer wants something, we won't do it. We're not an enterprise software company right now, and I think that comes up a lot, right? When you have some customers or this one customer wants this feature, and then they'll sign this $1 million deal. Our business, we really focus on, is this new feature going to impact the overwhelming majority of the people on our platform, and is it going to make their lives better? And if it doesn't, we won't put it in there. But we will validate whether or not people are interested. And there's quick, easy ways to do that by, you can put a button in that just says, hey, this feature is coming soon. Do you want to know when it's released? And if nobody wants to know, then it's probably not worth putting into the product, right? So we try to find really quick, lean ways to understand if people will care or not.
And that all comes down to, our business goal is growth right now. And so that's one of the reasons I joined just a few months ago, is just seeing that restraint that the company had and understanding what their goal was and not losing sight of it. Because I know that's such a, common mistake or, pressure that startups feel.
What's sort of the most enabling aspect of the management team that allows for this test everything, here's if it doesn't work, then you can figure out what does work. I know that some companies don't have that mindset.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said, right? But it's top down, right? And so our CEO is a huge advocate for this approach in our culture, and has made it clear that every single team, whether you're on sales or you're on marketing or on product or on the growth team and on the engineering team, you should be testing and finding ways to get better at what you're doing every day and how you're serving those customers. But it has to be top down, and it has to be vocalized amongst the entire organization that this is how we do things. We have regular growth meetings too, or experimentation meetings, where we show what our team has been testing as well as what other teams have tested and what those results are. And just that helps people see that it's okay to test, that I should be testing, and then it's okay for those tests not to work out. So, yeah.
I think a couple of things I've noticed is one thing is that the leadership makes our goals in the form of OKRs very clear. So everybody kind of knows what we're shooting for and how to define our own objectives to help get to that point. And the other thing is that they give the teams autonomy. So we have small cross-functional teams that work toward these things, and they're accountable and they have autonomy so that they can do what needs to happen, run the kinds of experiments, and show the results. And that's what's appreciated, not whether it's successful or not, but they look to what we learned.
I think one other thing too is just the team has the confidence that there's a process in place right? So, and that process is ensuring that we're testing things that will actually have an impact if they're successful. And so there's an education piece that has to start all of this off, and that's just how do you get a really well-defined structure and process around how we're doing testing, what kind of things we test, and how we determine if they're successful or not. Because otherwise, it's going to be impossible to get support, right? Because they won't know that what's going out is useful or impactful, but we have that process in place, and so it makes them much more comfortable.